Well, hello, everybody, and welcome again to another episode of the Most Important Conversations. Today, we are so joyfully happy and enthusiastically excited to talk to Judith Pinkerton, who has developed Music for Life, and she's got a new book out called Thriving Through Adversity, and also the Key to Me mobile app that is just launching today. Is that right, Judith?
Mhm.
What's so exciting about this, Judith, is that your background and your expertise in music you've had a really lengthy career, and I'm going to let people go and read the bio notes and the show notes and everything on the other end of this to find out your background. But I mean, you approach music from a science, and everything you're doing with Music for Life and Thriving Through Adversity and Key to Me is about how to connect the dots between the power, the transformative power of music on our minds, on our emotions, on our physical health, on our mental health, and all of this kind of stuff. And so today, everyone, we want to just have a very open conversation with Judith about what is the power behind music. Music has been studied for generations now in terms of the transformative impact that it can have on human beings. Some say it was even the very first language. Before there was language, there was music. And so music is very much ingrained in the human experience. We want to explore a bit of that today. And then, Judith, we want to talk about Thriving Through Adversity, the phenomenal book that you've put out to really help practitioners, mental health practitioners, understand how to use music as a powerful transformative tool. And then we want to talk about Key to Me, the mobile app, and your whole vision for how music can be such a transformative element of the human experience. So, Judith, welcome to the show, and let's just dig in here, real high level. Tell me about your personal passion around music. What was it that made you say, I think this is a key here that we can lean into that could unlock something for humanity?
Well, I had my own personal experience where my solo violin music replaced medication in a hospital after a loved one's emergency back surgery. And so when that happened, with the blood pressure coming into normal range and the nurse being aghast at, how did this happen? I thought he doesn't need the medication I'm going to give him. I was like, what? What do you mean that? Because I was
Mm-hmm.
doing something else. It was in music, but it wasn't focused on music as a healing tool.
Right.
So that really lit my passion of wanting to understand what that was all about. At the time, I was living in Anchorage, Alaska, had no clue that there was a profession called music therapy. And then shortly thereafter, moved to Las Vegas and bumped into a music therapist and the whole profession. And that really put me on the path to becoming credentialed, to becoming licensed, and to help our profession make a bigger deal out of
Mm.
how do you apply music therapeutically to affect literally from womb to tomb, from cradle to grave. And so let's kind of fast forward and put ourselves right where we're at right now. Um, I remember when the pandemic started, and I was actually shock of shocks, excited because I had been trying to do virtual for
Mm.
years, and now people were forced to do virtual. And so I'm always trying to look at the bright side of things. How, what's the positive that's going to come out of this? So I knew that
Mm-hmm.
we were going to establish a new normal. What is that new normal going to be once the pandemic is kind of behind us? And what does that look like? Well, the new normal is a normalized chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens with that normalized chaos is it's become a comfort zone for us.
Mm-hmm.
Isolation, yep, we know what that's all about. Stuck in anxiety, yep, we know what that's all about. Depression, anger, sadness, all of that. We've been so fully immersed in it that has
Mm.
become our new normal, where we just are so comfortable now being in this zone for years that we don't even know we're in it.
Yeah, this goes to the human proclivity of in terms of the way the brain works. It's sort of like that old idiom, the devil you know. Even though it's a situation that is not healthy, is not productive, is not enlivening, we deal with it, we tolerate it, and we end up living lives we tolerate. And so it's an interesting point. We become so conditioned to an ill health, uninspiring way of living life, but because we know it, we're willing to tolerate it and deal with it.
Yes. So now let's connect it to our music habits. So
Mm-hmm.
we generally will listen to music or play music that matches where we're at. It resonates with me. That's what I feel like listening to right now, right? So if you are trapped in anxiety, anger, depression, or sadness, for instance, stress, overwhelming stress, it's interesting what you will gravitate to. It may be music that matches where you're at and kind of relieves the pressure because, oh, music is my therapist. Oh, they understand what I'm going through. The music itself, the lyric, are matching some part of me that I can really connect to and resonate with. The danger is that if that is most of what you listen to, you're actually perpetuating a comfort zone that is that normalized chaos in that particular mood. So, for instance, you could be trapped in anger and just think that you're energized all the time.
Right.
And you're listening to music that, validates that energy and actually keeps you trapped there. Anxiety is another danger zone. You could be thinking that you're just excited all the time and not realizing that the music that you're wanting to listen to, is actually keeping you trapped in a state of anxiety, people experiencing panic attacks and other things that come as a result of anxiety. Another danger zone that is very serious nowadays and growing is depression. And as we know, getting trapped in depression may lead to death by suicide.
Yeah. Yeah.
What happens in music habits, whether playing music or listening to music, is that you resonate with that music and it keeps you spiraling down. Unfortunately, I've been aware of too many and what their music habits were prior to death by suicide. And it is a real danger zone. But what happens is in this comfort zone of depression, the person just feels calm, leave me alone. I'm calm, and everybody else is seeing danger signs, right?
Right.
So listening habits can contribute to danger zones that we have come to recognize as just a comfort zone. It's where I'm comfortable. I've been in it for so long. I don't even know how to get out of it. I don't even know that I'm in it. So what happens with this music app is that it is so different and it's patented. It is so different from anything else that's out there. You take an emotional profile quiz to find out if you're trapped in this chronic comfort zone, is what we call them. And there's 3 different types of zones that you may be trapped in that you start learning about. So you're able to save the image that shows what your emotional profile is, and you're able to access resources that will take you into a deeper dive into yourself, understanding yourself more, which is why the app is called Key to Me. You want to decode yourself, and MEE is not a typo. MEE stands for music exercising emotions. And it's an interesting cathartic experience that has enduring transformation possibilities. Enduring.
Yeah. What's really interesting about this, let's take a step back for our listeners and viewers, because what you're really talking about, I mean, we could say that any sort of sensory experience has the ability to have create flow states or create peak experiences or to activate something within us. A good meal that reminds you of maybe a moment, when you were a kid, a meal that your mom made or something like that can transport you back. Like, our emotions are very closely connected to the sensory world, and the same thing with smells. As you know, there's a huge movement right now in the mental health world around the power of psychedelics and their ability to override the addictive proclivities of the brain. One of the things we always talk about in the most important conversations is how all human beings are technically addicts, and I know that's a charged word, but when you reframe addiction, it's just reinforced behavior that the brain is neurochemically reinforcing for you to stay in. So you're exactly right when you say that people can get neurochemically addicted to depression. And people might say, oh, why would I don't want to be depressed? Why would I stay locked in a depressive mental state? But again, it's the brain knows what it knows. It's the devil that it knows. There's a comfort zone. There's a predictability. Predictability is really key to the brain's sense of survival. If you can predict the future, there's sort of this assumption that, okay, I'm going to survive it. I know what's coming. I know how to manage it. And yet we live in a moment of profound thriving change. So we're seeing a lot um, of tools starting to bubble up, from in terms of, uh, diet to psychedelics, to exercise, to all kinds of things that people are using. And all of these things, incidentally, can be helpful to mitigate the effects of stress and anxiety and depression and all of these sorts of things. What I think is so interesting about what you created, is that music has been with us, for all of human history. As I said in the beginning, some anthropologists believe that it might even have been pre-language, like it was the way that we communicated, even before we had, verbal language and symbolic language. Um, and so what's interesting is I think humans have naturally, organically always used music as a form of therapy without even realizing it. And so what you've done is you've actually said, well, let's actually go deeper into this. Let's find out how music actually is a therapy, and how can we be really intentional with that as a therapeutic, device. And so I think it's fascinating. So what people do when they go in your app is they get a profile of sort of the state that they're in, and then what you're saying is you can be really intentional with, well, if you're listening to one type of music that's keeping you locked in anxiety or locked in depression or locked in some state, you can use music to pull you out of it. Is that what I'm understanding that you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. So there's such a variety of music listening habits. So one of them is that people will say, I don't want to feel what I'm feeling, recognizing that they are in an unsettled state. I want to feel that. I want to feel something different. And so
Hmm.
they will push play on music or play music, making music that they seek to put them into that state. So for instance, if they're in depression or not feeling energetic,
Right.
they may put energetic music on, right, to move them into that and hoping that that will solve the problem.
Hmm.
What this methodology does is it takes that stimulative music category and that sedative music category and actually breaks it into three parts instead of just two parts. So in the music therapy profession for decades, there have been two categories of music, the stimulative or the sedative. You'll find it in research and textbooks. And what the Music for Life music medicine protocol does is break it into three parts. It's recognizing that stimulative music can be unsettling and it can be happily energizing.
Hmm.
And those are two different kinds of music.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
then we look at how can we validate where somebody is at. So if you're in an unsettled state and you want to move from there, rather than pushing play on music that targets where you want to be, uh, we've discovered that may not work.
Hmm.
It may only be a temporary solution. I am looking for long-term solutions. And we have success with looking back at people 10, 20, 30 years ago that are doing well because of this prescriptive approach. So
Hmm.
we want to validate where somebody's at and then neutralize that and then shift into a positive mindset. So there's a mood sequence formula that becomes specific and very individualized about how you start modulating your music listening or your music performance,
Hmm.
or your singing and songwriting skills. This pervades every aspect of music, whether you're
Hmm.
composing it, singing it, playing it, or just simply listening to it, being at a concert.
Hmm.
What is it that is going to really help you develop those life skills where you can neutralize anger, anxiety, depression, and sadness in as little as 15 minutes.
Wow. And how long does it stay though? So once you've flipped into a new state, do you have to keep listening to the music, or what is your research, shown?
Interesting. If you listen to music like 24/7, like you have to listen to it or you're going to go into that state don't want to be in, right? So
Mhm.
music's got to be in the background all the time. What you're actually doing is self-medicating with music.
Right.
So that's not working
Yeah.
because if you turn it
Because you
off,
haven't got to the
then
source. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So what happens with people that tend to use music a lot, and have to use music because they recognize it's their medicine, they're using it incorrectly.
Mm.
So when you start developing these habits and understand mood sequence formulas and how to create specialized playlists that you then cull from to create prescriptive playlists, you start modulating your music listening habits in such a way that now it works when you're not listening to music.
Mm.
That you have been able to condition your full emotional landscape, where it's interesting. People will report that they'll start feeling that unsettled mood and the music starts playing in their head.
They hear it. Oh, interesting.
And
Interesting.
because there's a shift in the music that's been modulated through this whole journey, and some people call it a roller coaster of emotion,
Mhm.
um, the music, as we know, cues you, right? You
Right.
know, if you have
Right.
your favorite playlist and the song stops, you know what the next song is. It starts playing in your head before it starts
Yeah.
playing, right?
Yeah.
You've conditioned yourself with that. So it's the same thing with the music that is profoundly connected to pure qualities of emotion. It starts and stops emotion and it helps them to express out in a healthy, full way so
Mm.
that you're expressing anger, anxiety, depression, sadness in a very healthy way. And then it's gone and you
Mm.
shift into a more peaceful or a more happy state.
Mm. Now, I have a question on music generally because I don't. There's a conversation going on right now, and we're going to have some guests on our show who are music producers, in Hollywood and some different groups and individuals that participate in the music industry. And some of these folks that we're going to have on, a couple of them in particular, they've been part of the music industry going back into the early 1970s. And they've watched the change of music over the decades. And there's a critique right now that some of them have that what we call music today is, popular music, I'm speaking specifically about, is really just um, operating like almost like binaural beats and creating an addiction sequence in the brain that is because it's overly simplified. It's all about the hooks, in terms of the choruses and this and the ability to sing along. And when you strip down what we call popular music today, it's way less complex and way less interesting as a medium than, say, music that was being produced prior to the advent of, computerized drums and computerized instruments and the ability to basically have a production studio in your home when you needed to actually play real instruments. And there was a lot more complexity to the building of the music. So I'm wondering in your research if you found a distinction between music as it has been made up until, say, I don't know, the early 2000s is when people start to really talk about music shifting into more of just a content addiction thing versus music as an art form. Is there a difference that you've seen in the types of music? And I'm not talking about genre, but the complexity. In other words, years ago there was this dialogue, or there's a lot of this research and dialogue that was spurred out of it that listening to classical music or Mozart was great to play if you had a newborn baby, that it stimulated neuronal production in the brain and was very activating. And so that classical music is seen as very complex. There's a lot of movements to it. There's a lot of dimensions to it compared to, say, popular music. So have you looked into the distinctions there? Is all music equal, or is there music that is more effective or less effective?
That's a it's a very deep, profound topic in that music is so individualized. I would be very interested to hear the producers and these leaders in the music industry to get their take on where they feel we're at right now. My personal observations that tend to look at some societal trends is that there's a lot of crossovers of genres. Typical nowadays, you'll like, well, what genre is that? Well, I don't know. It's kind of this and it's that, and it's
Mm-hmm.
it's a mixture
Mm-hmm.
as artists are seeking to sell more. I'm going to bring
Yeah.
this artist from pop over into country or rap over into country,
Yeah.
to sell more. And what it's doing is it's fusing all of these styles together,
Yeah.
where there's some confusion, I think, in, exactly what is it. There's just so much in it, that it's supporting more of a confused state of mind, where the music and the lyric generally do not match.
Mm.
So you'll have a particular energy of music that's, say, soothing,
Right.
and the lyric are talking about something very unsettling.
Mm. Hmm.
And what it sets up in the brain is this conflict,
Hmm.
I'm not soothed about that. And it
Hmm.
may be so unconscious that you're not even aware that you're making those connections.
Hmm.
But it is really deep seated and deep rooted in our emotional condition,
Right.
and how music is put together and put out there, where the music and the words do not match. And
Yeah.
so then you've got happy music and something unsettling, right? I'm not supposed to
Right.
be
Right.
happy about that, is the
Right.
unconscious reaction to
Hmm.
it.
Yeah. And does it matter if you're listening to music with words or without words, in terms of the using music as a therapy? Because the words add another dimension. And if you, to your point, if you're listening to words that are um, not in the emotional state that you're actually trying to cue into, that creates a conflict, does it not?
Yeah. So there's a mood music analysis that has to be done on every single piece of music.
Mm.
So we have quite a library of recommended music in all genres, for this prescriptive playlist protocol. Um, so as you look at a piece of music, um, there are certain requirements for this mood sequence formula and prescriptive playlist to work. And so
Mm.
there are some places in this playlist where you have to have, or it's strongly recommended that there's no words.
Okay. Yeah.
And then there's places that, it could be. Could the whole
Right.
thing be instrumental? Yes. Could the whole playlist have words? Yes. But it's recommended that there's some diversity. And
Mm.
there are certain places within that mood sequence where it is best placed. So yeah, it gets very complex. And
Hmm.
it really requires advanced training for music therapists to deploy it to
Mm.
maximum. We do train mental health providers at the level 3 in order to deploy this in their practice. And then we train all kinds of folks
Right.
to, do self-care on themselves, as well as help athletes with their peak performance,
Mm.
employees with their peak performance. So there's a variety of applications, as there are as many humans that we have on the planet.
Yeah. Let's talk about music therapy for a second, because we kind of jumped into what you're doing to help advance that field. But a lot of our viewers and listeners may have never even heard of the fact that music can be therapy. Now, when you stop and think about it, kind of makes sense. Because we, as you were saying earlier, we use music to self-medicate all the time without even realizing it. There's a reason why we put on a particular song when we're feeling in a particular state. Interestingly enough, some people, as I was saying earlier, you can get addicted even to a depressed state. And so some people will put on melancholy or depressing music when they're in that state to reify and reinforce the state that they're feeling, almost to validate it in a sense. Other people, not so much. They don't want to stay in that state. So they'll use music to self medicate and try to pull them into a different state. But so we've always all done this, I think. Everyone has had the experience, if they reflect on it, of, oh, yeah, of course I use music to alter my state. But I don't think a lot of people know that music is also professionally and formally a therapy. So share a little bit about music as a therapy, just to help people understand that. How does this even work as an industry? How long has it been around? I mean, what can you share a bit with us about music as a therapy?
Sure. So, first of all, you have to be a musician. In order to become a music therapist, you have to enroll in a degree program. There's more than 80 across the country that offer a music therapy degree in the music department. So you have to audition to get into the music department, and then you major
Mm.
in music therapy. So you go through 4 years, there's clinical practicums, and then before you can graduate from that university, you have to tack on a 6-month full-time internship at an approved site. So I've been an internship director, so I'm aware of how to do that as well. Once the student completes that internship, then they apply with approval from their university to sit the exam administered by the Certification Board for Music Therapists. And they have to pass that exam, which is not an easy one to pass. Once you pass that, then you earn the credential of MT-BC, which stands for Music Therapist-Board Certified. In Nevada, we passed the second, actually, music therapy license that was approved in the country. North Dakota beat us by like 2.5 months. However, we were quick about putting our regulations together, and I was able to earn the very first music therapy license that was issued in the United States back in 2011. So now we have 18 states recognize music therapy with a formal recognition or a license or something that's required in order to practice in that state. And there's like another dozen states that are close to getting some sort of bill put together and passed. So there is a lot of recognition for the music therapy industry. 6 years ago, when I was doing a lot of advocacy in my own company, there wasn't even a music therapy industry recognized. And today it's recognized as a $2.62 billion industry.
Wow. And does that mean that it's covered by insurance companies in some cases as well?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. There's even a medical device that serves neurodisabilities where they've been able to attract like $27 million in investments. So music therapy is really a recognized industry today. And it's making significant changes in people's lives, literally from womb to tomb. So there's a lot of focus on dementia and, the baby boomers population, because there's so many. So music therapy is absolutely recognized in being able to be supportive in connecting with a loved one or helping mental health states. Because as you grow older, things start happening, things start breaking down or whatever, right? And it's how do you thrive through that? And music therapy absolutely is a cornerstone. So the difference between what I am putting out there as a music therapist and the music therapy industry, music therapy requires an approved therapist who is graduated from a program that's been approved by our American Music Therapy Association. And then it's through that therapeutic relationship with the client that you actualize music applied as a therapeutic tool. So there's clinical basis, evidence basis for the music-based interventions that are adaptable in the moment. So a music therapist may be going into a session with an individual or a group and may have plan A. This is what I plan to do, is I'm going to start, so I'm the middle of it, so I'm going to end. And something happens at the very beginning where that plan is no longer going to work. We are trained to adapt immediately. And we may have a plan B and that doesn't work. And we may have a plan C and that doesn't work. And now we're improvising completely through the session in order to actualize whatever the therapeutic goals are. Music has that adaptability. And when you have a therapist that is fully trained with that particular population, I don't care whether it's autism or TBI or addiction, we are trained to be able to address those goals that other therapists are addressing, but we utilize a music-based intervention approach instead.
Are there any forms of music or genres that don't serve in a particular context a therapeutic use? So any type of music, depending on the context, I know that certain types of music are used for certain contexts, but music, any type of music can be used relative to the condition that you're trying to treat.
Yeah, I'll give you an example, Chad. There Oh, okay. So I was the music therapist for a drug court judge. And so I had a 12-week program that I had put together for his young offenders. And I had mostly male. Well, actually, it was all male in this particular group because we didn't do co-ed groups. And there was one gentleman that came in who insisted on me playing a particular piece of music. And I looked at it and went, it's not happening, because I wasn't in a setting that would be able to protect or support the havoc that would probably ensue if I played that piece of music. So I
Mm,
denied playing it, which I don't normally do. But in that context, it was not appropriate. Circle
mm,
forward 3 years. This same individual now finds me in a treatment facility. And in this treatment facility, he comes forward and he says, we're playing that piece of music.
mm,
And I said, okay,
mm.
because I knew I was in a setting where
Right.
there was protection, there was support, and we were going to do it. And he still
Mm,
had this piece of music that he had to listen to, right?
mhm.
So this piece of music ended up unlocking a repressed memory for
Interesting.
him in the middle of that group. It was a very large group. I have learned how to be able to adapt music therapy for large groups, which is usually never done.
Mm,
Usually the groups are 6, 10, 12, 20 is a large group. In this particular group that I played this piece of music, I had over 30 people
wow.
in the
Wow.
group setting, all men,
Mm,
with a couple counselor students that wanted to come in and observe what I was doing.
mm,
So what happened for this individual was that it unlocked this repressed memory where he, up to that point, had not realized that the screaming in his head was related to this traumatic experience that this piece of music had him reliving constantly. And he
mm,
had not been able to connect the dots because the memory was so repressed from the deep-seated trauma. So the trauma was related to him being in a blood in, blood out gang,
mm,
and a childhood girlfriend, or I should girlfriend that was a girl,
mhm,
um, having to be taken care of because of some situations that occurred
mm,
in and out of the gang. And he was being asked to be a part of it.
mm,
So he left the house after being forced to bring her there and could hear her screams as they were raping and murdering her.
mm,
And that's what lived in his head
mm,
for years, attempted suicides, all of this. So with music therapy, we were able to unlock that repressed memory. And then he decided he wanted to do the prescriptive playlist. And it
mm,
was that piece that allowed him to release all of the anger, the depression, the anxiety, the sadness, and shift into a greater place of peace and happiness,
wow.
where now he became compliant about utilizing medication, that he realized he did need to use it for mood management,
Hmm.
and went on. And I actually, in the book, Thriving Through Adversity, there's a QR code where it takes you to his video and you can listen to him talk
Oh,
about his
interesting.
experience.
Wow. So that's a very extreme case, and I'm sure you shared that as an example to show the power of this therapy in the most extreme cases, which by deduction we would assume, well, then things that are less extreme
Mm-hmm.
and less buried in our subconscious can be addressed as well. Now that's trauma related, but what about you mentioned Alzheimer's and things like that? You know, how does music help generate or develop brain cells so that we're not suffering these debilitating brain diseases?
Well, so in terms of connecting with a loved one who is challenged with Alzheimer's or dementia, um, music has that ability to unlock memories
Mm,
and to connect speech with singing and reliving times when that person was at their fullest, which is
mm,
usually in their 20s. So the advice to caregivers is that you want to find the music that was in that decade of when they were most alive. And typically it's they're in your 20s. So you have to calculate the age, right? And then go to that decade and then pick out the number ones on Billboard. You can easily go into Billboard and go, okay, what were the number one hits for the 60s or the 70s or whatever it was that your loved one is in their 20s in that decade. And it has a way of unlocking the memories and locking the ability to connect with the music, with memories, and able to manage behavior, because now it's happy times that they're remembering and the endorphins are released and it changes behavior. It changes that affect so that now they're happy and they're willing and wanting to talk and connect. So yeah, that's the magic of music, but you have to know what music will do that. And my experience too is that even with elderly, this mood sequence formula is successful. And when you think about, oh, well, they would never listen to metal, actually it's interesting because metal, not all metal, but a lot of metal is really great at matching that kind of angst, angry state. And it works well with those that are in that state. But you don't want to listen to it, to the point where now the anger gets even more.
Right.
So there's a gentle point where you have to slowly segue to the next mood in this mood sequence formula, in order to maximize the use of music applied as medicine. But yeah, it's a very rewarding population to work with when you just see them come alive. I had this experience with my own father, who is now 93. And this is actually our anniversary month. A year ago, on August 16th, he almost died. And I was able to find out what music instantly was going to make him come back to life. And it was a deeply moving experience for me, my mother, who was also present and is now 93, and the medical team that was present. So finding out what is that healing music, what is that music that's going to open up and make you thrive through life, because what you might use for healing music may be totally different than someone close to you.
Right. Interesting. And so for the Thriving Through Adversity book that you have here, just let's talk a little bit about the book. Let's talk a little bit about the app that's just launched today. So the book, is this book for anybody to read, or is it a specific audience that is going to really benefit from this book? Let's start with that.
So I had an advisor last year tell me that I'm trying to boil the ocean, changing how we consume music and how we create music. And so this book is about harnessing the power of powerful voices to help influence this change that has to happen to help our mental health crisis. And so with that, this book is about mental health providers being able to harness the power of music. So it's very descriptive and detailed about how this music medicine protocol works. So there's a lot of research. There's over 100 citations in it that support the effectiveness of music therapy. Now, this protocol is not music therapy. It's actually music therapy informed clinical strategies. So anybody, meaning the 58 million people that 1.2 million mental health providers are serving, plus anybody else that's having challenges with mental health, is who this book is for. And so it's not just about the protocol, but it's about, so actually I've had people go, it's your autobiography. And I'm like, well, it's not really meant to be that, but yes, there's a lot of examples about how a person, me specifically, thrives through many adversities, from harassments and discrimination to children with addiction to just on and on and on. And the thread with it is how music has supported thriving
Mm.
through all that adversity over the decades.
Okay. So anyone could technically read it, but it is targeted really at those who are going to be providing that type of therapy or want to apply this type of therapy
Mhm.
to their life. So in that way, it's a bit thriving through adversity is a bit of a complement then to the Key to Me app that has just been released. So let's talk a little bit about the app. Everyone loves the convenience of apps. It makes things easier in our life. And so in this case, you're trying to really make it easier for people to benefit from music therapy. What if someone has, I don't know, an Apple or a Spotify account? How does it work with your app? How do they, they've already got their playlist, they've built all of this stuff, but they're like, gee, I could really use this. I'd like to be a little bit more intentional and targeted with how I'm thinking about music as a therapeutic thing for my life. Tell us a little bit about Key to Me and the experience that they would have if they downloaded it.
So if you download it today, it's about taking that emotional profile quiz and really start investigating what is my landscape of emotion all about. And the links that are within the app will take you to a variety of resources to start figuring that out. So, I mean, there's playlists, there's books, there's all sorts of resources, research to tap into. The book is meant to complement and give you even more information about how the app is designed to work in its full glory. So we're in
Mm.
1.0 right now.
Okay.
2.0 is going to be launched by the end of the year. 2.0 is going to be able to support you creating your own prescriptive playlist in the app.
Mm.
So you will have to have a Spotify account, but you will
Okay.
not be able to use it going outside of the app. But you have to have a Spotify account to access what is within the app.
Okay.
So with that, you'll be creating a prescriptive playlist. You have to go through tutorials. You have to go through listening assessments to determine exactly what within our library of recommendations from all genres and all moods is going to be specific to what you need in order to activate your desire and ability to thrive through any challenge by
Mm.
significantly reducing anger, anxiety, depression, sadness, moving into more peace and happiness in as
Mm-hmm.
little as a half an hour when it's a
Mm.
personalized. We have standardized playlists that are only 15 and 20 minutes, but the personalized playlist where it's your prescriptive playlist, Chad, is probably
Mm-hmm.
going to be at least 30 minutes long. And and then it tracks on your listening experience. So then you're
Mm.
going to be listening to this every day for
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks in order to actualize the therapeutic goals that you've identified in the app that you want to accomplish. So there is interaction with a Music for Life trained specialist in
Mm.
order
Okay.
to get the mood sequence formula that is going to be best for you. And
Mm.
then make sure that your playlist is populated correctly so that you have the best opportunity for actualizing the goals that you've set out that you want to achieve.
Okay. And what about people who don't have a Spotify, say they have Apple Music or Amazon Music? Are you going to expand into those platforms at some point?
Probably at some point, but right
Yeah,
now it's the Spotify.
it's the
Um,
biggest.
Yeah, and the other
Yeah.
thing that is interesting is that you're going to, if you don't find a piece of music that's going to work for you in our library, you will have the opportunity to give us your suggestion of what you would like to have go into your playlist. And we
Mm.
will have a specialist that will tell you and respond to you and say yes or no. If it's a no, then you understand why, because the tutorials help you to understand how to do this mood music analysis. So
Mm.
this protocol is never going to tell you not to listen to something. But
Mm-hmm.
when we look at applying music as medicine, it's very specific
Mm.
about what exactly is going to work best within this protocol, calling from all genres.
Okay. Now I have a question about um, i- is it just listening to the music that has the effect, or is it also the environment in which you are listening to the music? And I'll tell you just a brief little story about that. So last year, it was reported in 2023, and we'll see what 2024 numbers are going to look like, that music sales this was shocking to me, that 12% of music sales were physical music sales, records. Like people are buying records again. And now the reason that records are gaining in popularity, one of the reasons is probably a few, but one of the ones that I've talked to people about and seen kind of reported on is, and I've had the experience incidentally in 2021, my daughters had bought a record player and they're like, oh, you know, they started collecting records. And I thought this was hilarious because I got rid of all my records and CDs and my physical music, of which I had thousands and thousands. And I sold it all, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, something like that, 10 years ago. And I'm watching them and I'm like, this is interesting, you know, and I've been streaming music, you know, for the last 10 years. And so I went out and bought a record player and I bought a couple of, you know, jazz records that I really liked. And I started to play them. And I had a really interesting experience that I've now gone on to talk to others who are sharing, like, yeah, this is really profound. And the experience is I was way more present to the music I was listening to when it was on a record because I have to flip it in 20 to 30 minutes. So I have to be paying attention to where it is, what's going on, right? It's not, it's usually one artist on the record. So I'm kind of listening to the music as the art form was meant to be listening according to the artist. This is the order of the songs. This is the experience I wanted to provide to you, etc. And also because it's physical, you know, and a lot of people are doing this. I have my record player. I think I would have over 300 records now in the last 2 years. Like I've gone on this sort of spree, you know, it's kind of interesting. And, you know, I've got the chair and the headphones and I light the incense and it's a whole thing. So I create an entire experience around that. Now, I know that we're not talking about that here with the app and everything like that because we use Spotify and streaming, but it leads me to wonder, is it just the listening to the music or is it also the environment and the experience you create around it that's also important?
Absolutely. In fact, you reminded me that I haven't talked about the 6 habits of music medicine for highly empowered people. And the sixth habit that you learn about is the environmental influence
Okay.
and what you need to do to create that environment that is going to be welcoming and that utilizes the music in a specific way.
Mm.
So yeah, so there's a curriculum besides the trainings that we train people to facilitate called 6 habits of music medicine for highly empowered people. And
Okay.
there's 5 activities per habit. So for instance, habit number 1 is zone recognition. You know, what's my zone? Where are all the zones? And so it takes you through all of that through 5 activities to learn about that. Then you go on to the next habit, which is about building your emotional awareness. You know, what am I feeling right now? And what would I call it? You know, am I in that
Mm.
danger zone where I'm like confusing what it really is? So you go through that habit with 5 activities that teach you about what is emotional awareness. The third
Mm.
one, the third activity then is about mood control, you know, and what does that mean? How are
Mhm.
your moods controlled by media? What do you do? I mean, there's so many different things looked at through 5 activities again to be able
Mhm.
to understand that more fully. And then the next uh, habit is here. I'm going on. So we got zone recognition, emotional awareness, mood control, emotional fluidity, environment, and then I'm missing the 6th one. Ah! Well, I'll
Mhm.
have to back up on that. But the 6th one is 5 activities that actually take you through what's the environmental influence that you have to do. So as you
Mm.
move through all 6 habits, you become an influencer
Mm.
and how to apply music as medicine with 30 activities that have therapeutic goals and intentions about how to actually apply these prescriptive playlists. So
Mm.
environment is very important.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
you may find outside of your room that you've built up so wonderfully, you know, that when you're in
Mhm.
a workspace, you know, you have to have headphones on and you have to
Mhm.
limit it because usually workspaces, the walls aren't very high. There's someone right next door to you, right? And you have
Mhm.
to be careful about invading their listening space so that
Mm.
they can control their
Right.
emotions, what's going on with their work focus.
Right.
So yeah, environmental influence is very important. And you were talking also about mindfulness,
Hmm.
and mindfulness is so big now. What am I doing right now?
Hmm.
It is so important. And to build this environment like you have, where you've got all five senses activated,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
In this
Hmm.
environment enhances the
Hmm.
experience. So yeah, good for you. I want to come over and check it out.
Yeah. Well, it's a big thing. So I have a Substack that I've just started recently, and it's all about analog living,
Hmm.
and it's about um, how to be very intentional to deepen our sensual experience of life, because I find that we're so heady and we're so disconnected from the body and we're so disconnected from our emotions that I believe that this is contributing to a lot of the mental health breakdowns that people are having because they're just fragmented. And so, how do we live in a more slow, the Japanese would call it sort of this wabi-sabi experience you're trying to create, the,
Hmm.
the presence and the acceptance of where you are at this moment, the perfectness of the whole thing, and yet you're still just totally embracing it. And so I'm very intentional about trying to create spaces like that, and I would encourage listeners and viewers to really start to be intentional as well. Not all spaces are equal. Not all environments are equal, and in the same way that certain music pulls for certain emotional or cognitive experience or state, so too does environment. And I think on all levels in our society, we have really become so utilitarian that we have sort of cheapened the true richness of life that we can have. And so it's exciting to me to think that music doesn't just have to be this sort of thing in the background, but
Hmm.
that it can be back in the foreground of
Hmm.
what we are attending to at this moment without distraction. This is what we're doing. This
Hmm.
is the experience that we're leaning into. And when we lean into an experience that deeply and that intentionally, it can have profound transformative effects on our mental health, on our emotional health, even on our physical health, because the integration of mind, body, emotions, I mean, all of this are one thing, really, at the end of the day.
So I just remember that fourth habit that connects to what you were just talking about, triggered it in
Okay.
me.
Yep.
It's a new phrase that I created called music hygiene.
Mm.
So music hygiene in this context and how it relates to what you're talking about is cleansing, being able to cleanse our emotions
Mm.
so that we're not trapped.
Got it. Yeah.
And
Makes
how do you
sense.
do that? So that's where the prescriptive approach comes in. But it's just understanding you want to take this bath, you
Yeah.
want to bathe yourself in music, and you
Yeah.
create this environment that allows you to bathe in this music, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, so perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And another question I have for you now that we're really rocking and rolling, as I'm thinking about all this stuff now, I was in Bali recently for a couple months, and I would go to this place called the Yoga Barn that they have in Ubud, and of course they do yoga there, but they do other things, and they do what would qualify, I believe, as forms of music therapy. They have gong baths and crystal baths and drumming circles. I did some drumming circles, and I did all of it. But the gong bath was fascinating to me because you're just laying down, and of course the environment is very intentional. They've got the incense. It's a beautiful, um, you know, um, organic, architecturally built, biophilic design building. It's raining out, and then you have this massive gong at the front of the room, and I didn't know anything about like the techniques of and the impact that a gong could have. But the guy who was leading it, he's a professional gong master, and he had several of them actually, and he played this sequence of hitting different gongs, and it was hypnotic. I mean, I found myself dropping into, I guess an alpha state or something like that, or delta state. I mean, it was just, and time. I mean, we were in there an hour. It felt like it was 10 minutes. It was just
Uh-huh.
gone, you
Uh-huh.
know. So there's this time got twisted, and so um, I'm assuming with key to me and the playlist, people should also be intentional maybe about the headphones that they're using so that they're getting a better quality sound. Again, you were just talking about being really intentional about the environment. I mean, to get the most out of this, there's probably some things they could do to really heighten and accentuate the experience.
Right, right. And boy, you're bringing back memories for me too, having experienced gong baths with, like 12 huge gongs in a small
Yeah,
room. It's
yeah,
like, it's so intense. And even the crystal bowls,
yeah.
can send you. So imagine having that kind of experience in the middle of your prescriptive playlist,
Hmm.
where it becomes a deeply spiritual experience where you've already been able to let go of all of the angst or the unsettledness, whatever that was about. You address that, and the emotional tension has been relieved so that you can sink even more deeply into this
Hmm.
kind of experience.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, it's just I love all of it. It's
Hmm.
understanding, what do I need right now? Being so in tune with yourself,
Hmm.
with this, built up emotional awareness that you know what you need when you need it. And yes, this portable command center that we call our cell phone
Hmm. Hmm.
has the power to help you, whether you're in the hospital, an airplane, the car,
Sure.
home, at work, whatever. Um, so when you don't have this huge environment that you've created, you can have it in your cell phone. But
Yeah,
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 both are highly recommended.
yeah. Very good. Well, Judith, this has been really, really enlightening. I want to encourage everyone to go to Amazon and
Mm,
check out the book Thriving Through Adversity. And today they can go download the app, Key to Me, right? That's available in the App Store and Google. I'm assuming both,
mhm.
right? And I want to encourage everyone to start to go through the process. Judith mentioned there's going to be a 2.0 that's going to sync up with your playlist coming soon, but start the process, start to actually go through and create, the profile for yourself, in terms of the type of therapy that might be useful to you, and to start to engage in the process. I mean, this is one of those types of therapies. I mean, we're all looking for ways to get off of pharmaceuticals as much as possible, and not have to rely on these things. There are things that we can do to impact our own mental health, our own physical health, our own emotional health. And it doesn't always have to be pop a pill related. The body is incredible when we know how to activate the natural healing mechanisms of the body, and we use the external stimuli of our external world and our environment by bringing intention to it. And that's what Key to Me is doing. And that's what Thriving Through Adversity helps to teach us to understand how to be really intentional about that. Judith, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. This was fascinating. I feel like now I could start asking another 2 hours of questions because my mind is starting to kind of go with this. So we'll probably have to have you back for a follow-up when you get 2.0 out,
Yeah.
and we can start to help people really understand the power of music as a way to heal. And so
Yes.
thank you so much for your time today.
Thank
Anything
you.
else? If they want more information, Judith, they can go to
It's
musicforlife.com, correct?
themusicforlife.com. Yep.
Themusicforlife.com.
The
The
music
music,
for life.
and the number four or letters,
Number
four.
four.
Number
Mhm.
four. The music, number four, life.com for more information as well, or go find the app Key to Me in the App Store. All right, everyone. We'll see you next time on another episode of The Most Important Conversations. Thanks for tuning in.
That concludes this episode of The Most Important Conversations. This in-depth conversation could set you on the path to self-improvement, which is essential if you want to be an effective leader and take meaningful action in your life. If you enjoyed this episode and want more of these stimulating discussions, you can find them at TMICglobal.com. Remember, the world is at a crossroads right now. You can't afford to waste this opportunity to take charge of your life, build meaningful relationships with others, and co-create a brighter tomorrow. Thank you for listening. See you on the next one.